Dozens of ancient villages overlook the prairie streams of northwest Iowa. Long ago, these people built earth lodges. They grew corn beside the rivers and searched for bison. But these Indians were afraid of their neighbors and fortified their villages. They dug ditches and piled up earth and built huge log stockades to protect their families. These were the Mill Creek Village people. In the 1930s, archaeologists from the State Historical Society of Iowa began to discover the remains of prehistoric villages along the banks of the Little Sioux and the Big Sioux rivers in northwest Iowa. The sites that they uncovered were part of the Mill Creek culture. This culture is recognized as an extension of the Middle Missouri tradition, farming cultures that flourished along the Middle Missouri River Valley in North and South Dakota. These air photographs show a Mill Creek site that has never been plowed. Archaeologists named it the Whitrock Site in honor of the farmer who preserved it. The defense ditch surrounding the village can still be seen, and oval depressions inside the ditch show where earth lodges collapsed. Infrared film is color sensitive to moisture. Low areas, such as the ditch, appear as deep red. A general plan of the village was made. It records the rampart, the ditch, and each house depression that could be seen when archaeologists walked the site. Work at the Whitrock site began near the north rampart. The earth was troweled off. Elaborate stonework was uncovered. The Indians had laid stones on the outer side of the rampart to keep the earth from washing down into the ditch that surrounded the village. Scraping off the earth, digging deeper into the rampart exposed the tan subsoil. There was a row of post holes filled with dark earth. Post holes showed where each of the stockade posts had been set. Post holes making a square pattern at either side of the entryway suggest that two towers formed part of the stockade at the entryway. Towers have also been found at other plains villages. The entryway or causeway itself had been covered with gravel. Gravel kept the path from getting muddy in wet weather. The ditch was originally much deeper than it appeared to the archaeologists. Over the centuries, layers of dirt washed in from the rampart, almost completely filling up the ditch. When Mill Creek Indians lived in the village, the ditch provided a barrier against attack. It was 7 feet deep on the village side. The ditch, the stockade, and the two towers at the north entryway were mapped. When the north rampart excavations were refilled, short fence posts were set over the original post holes. These posts are not as thick or as high as the original stockade. Stockade post holes were also located at the southeast corner of the village. Fence posts were set over the post holes to show the pattern of defense. Then archaeologists began digging inside the stockade looking for structural evidence of earth lodges. They cleared away earth and screened it, scraping away the soil to reach the original house floor. Post holes showed the wall outlines of rectangular lodges, but the patterns were complicated. Houses had been built over the remains of others. Wooden stakes were placed in the post holes to mark the house lines. The original earth lodge floors averaged 18 by 20 feet in size and had been set about 2 feet below the ground level. When an earth lodge collapsed, the roof and wall debris did not completely fill in the floor. This left oval depressions on the surface. Under each depression, there were remains of a rectangular lodge. Other wall lines showed where earlier houses had been built. Entrance tunnels opened to the south. Some were as long as 14 feet. They appear as dark oblong shapes in the subsoil. Tunnel floors were lower than the house floors. Rainwater stayed in the tunnel instead of running into the house. An original tunnel can be seen in this cross-section. It is 2.5 feet wide, and the dirt in it is light brown. Fire hearths were in the center of each lodge, between the heavy posts that supported the roof. Large storage pits were also uncovered. Only 2 out of the 20 house depressions were excavated. With the general excavation plan showing the house depressions, and with the information gained from excavating different areas of the village, it was now possible to project the settlement pattern for the entire Whitrock site. The village plan was completed by placing a rectangular lodge with a tunnel wherever an oval depression had been mapped. Using the village plan as a blueprint, a 3-dimensional model of the Whitrock site was built with clay and wire. The excavations were covered with plastic and then refilled. The Whitrock site is a registered national landmark, and 18 house depressions have been left for future research.
Like many other cultures, the prehistoric Mill Creek culture spread across the centuries to influence Indian societies in historic times. Agriculturally oriented hunters like the Mandan, who still lived on the northern plains in the 1830s, echo this earlier Mill Creek culture. George Catlin visited the Mandan in 1834 and left us written records of these people.
The Mandan are a most civilized tribe, gentlemanly and hospitable. Made me feel most welcome. In the center of the village, they hold games, festivals, and ceremonies. From the outside, their houses look like a mound of earth. Going inside, I was surprised to find them neat, comfortable, and spacious. Their 2 villages are stockaded with logs 18 feet high. The Mandan are not a warlike people and seldom raid their neighbors, but when invaded, they show valor and courage equal to any.
Tribal customs on the plains go back from history into prehistory. By working with the clay model and the paintings and words of George Catlin, the artist can make drawings of the Whitrock site as it may have appeared in 1400 AD. People in the Whitrock village faced different problems than we face today. A defense ditch was dug to help protect the villagers from attack. Archers standing inside the stockade could pick off the enemy as they struggled to make their way through the ditch. Village life was shaped by the environment which surrounded it. Families in the village had to produce every bit of food they ate, every tool they used, every piece of clothing they wore from the resources available to them. Large timbers were needed to build the village. Trees were brought down by setting small fires around the base. The burnt areas were then chipped away until the tree fell. Work had to be done with stone hammers and axes. This axe was probably lashed to a wooden handle. There wasn't much room inside the stockade. Houses were set close together. House roofs were probably used the same way we use porches and patios today. Building and repairing houses was a continuous activity. The house was made of wooden beams, tightly woven grass matting, and earth. When the house was finished, it was probably plastered over with clay. Inside the lodge, sleeping benches lined the walls around the central cook fire. Food was stored in pits in the ground. Skins had to be scraped clean and softened with bone and stone tools. Then the tanned hides were sewn together by hand, with bone needles threaded with sinew or thin strips of leather. Woman probably had her own sewing kit. This sewing kit, found at a Glenwood Earth Lodge, shows the variety of tools used. Jewelry was made of bone, like this pin, this engraved armlet, and these tinklers. Clothing was decorated with beads made of deer antler, bone, clay, and shell. Porcupine quills flattened with a bone tool were also used. Pendants were made of shell and animal claws and teeth. Hand drills were needed to put holes in beads and in stone pipes. red pipestone called catlinite was drilled to make this pipe. The stone was traded in from southwestern Minnesota. Drill bits were made from stone flakes. This particular pipe was never finished. There are no holes drilled in the bowl or in the stem. Making tools and weapons was a highly refined art. The design of each tool reflects how it was used. On a side scraper, the side opposite the blade was left thick so that a fair amount of pressure could be applied in removing flesh from a hide. Some knives were flaked from stone so that both sides could be used. This knife was flaked out of brown chalcedony traded from western North Dakota. It's as beautiful as it is efficient. Tools were also made from discarded animal bones. This knife was once the shoulder blade of a buffalo. It was made sharp with the aid of a whetstone. Unfinished tools like this bone fishhook blank give an indication of the time and energy it took to make even the simplest tools. Arrow points flaked from stone appear very fragile, but in fact are very sharp. Spear points made of deer antler did not break as readily as stone points when they struck a hard surface. Contests and games prepared the men for battle. One game was played with this chunky stone. It was rolled along the ground, and then the men would wager on who could hit it with a spear. Warriors could carry as many as 100 arrows in their quivers, and some were able to shoot between 15 and 20 a minute. Tribes in historic times throughout North America had shaman or medicine men, a position of honor which was very likely part of an ancient tradition. Thought to have power over animals, the shaman dressed in a costume representing the creature whose spirit he controlled. With rattles carved in the shape of animals and birds, he tried to drive out evil spirits, which the Indians thought caused disease and misfortune. Ceremonial effigies, such as those used by the shaman, were carved from stone, bone, and antler, or shaped out of clay. In historic times, the buffalo dance was performed to draw herds closer to the village. The prehistoric Mill Creek people probably did similar dances. The paint used to decorate the dancers' bodies was made from red and yellow ochre pigment. The pigment was ground and then mixed with fat. Mill Creek people depended to a large extent on the buffalo for meat. Hunting parties sometimes had to roam many miles in pursuit of the buffalo. They may have taken dogs along to carry supplies. The supplies were secured on travois, two poles about 15 feet long lashed to a dog's shoulders, leaving the butt ends to drag along. On the hunt, the men lived in small teepees. When hunting parties from different tribes met, they sometimes traded with each other. Farming was also an important part of village life. Corn, beans, and squash were planted outside the village, in little patches near the water. Bone picks were used to till hard soil and to uncover roots. Crops were cultivated with a hoe made from a bison horn. The shelled corn and the dried beans and squash were placed in storage pits. Baskets woven from thick grass provide a lightweight, dependable means for carrying food. Mill Creek baskets were probably very similar to those woven by the Mandan villagers in the early 19th century. This bowl-like depression served as a mortar. The corn was crushed with a stone pestle and grinding stone until it was a coarse meal. Pottery is valuable in the study of a people's origins and their relationship to other tribes. It is sometimes possible to distinguish one culture from another on the basis of their ceramics. Working with sherds from a crushed pot, it is possible to reconstruct an entire vessel. First, a clay model is made. Recovered sherds are then placed over it, and plaster is used to fill the areas where the pieces are missing. These people were skilled potters. They added crushed granite or sand to the clay to help keep the pots from cracking when they were fired. The pot walls were thin and uniform. Surfaces of most pots were plain, although some show traces of smoothed-over cord marks. Usually, only the lips, rims, and shoulders of pots were decorated. Mill Creek pottery exhibited great variety. This Mississippian pot was found at a Mill Creek site. It shows that the Mill Creek people were trading with other cultural groups. This pot, copied after a Mississippian pot, was probably made by a Mill Creek Indian. Its surface is not burnished, and the decoration is more crude than that found on Mississippian pottery. The idea for this bird effigy bowl may also have come from contact with Mississippian peoples.
"17 Mill Creek sites have been found in northwest Iowa. Artifacts uncovered at the different sites show a marked similarity, although differences in ceramics do occur from one area to another. Changes in style also took place over the centuries. The broad distribution of many of the ceramic, stone, and bone tools across the plains and woodland regions tells us that the Mill Creek people did not live in isolation. Around 1450 AD, the Mill Creek people left Iowa. We do not yet know why. Drought may have forced them to move, or other rival tribes may have become too strong and driven them out. The once thriving fortified villages were left to collapse and rot away.
I am the state archaeologist of Iowa. I discovered the fortifications at the Whitrock site in 1965. Artifacts shown by the archaeologist, Margie Staub, come from a number of different Mill Creek villages. These pots, stone tools, pipes, and ornaments are in the collections of the State Historical Society and the University of Iowa.